welcome to this week's edition of Learning Mishnah Berurah. We are currently in Orach Chaim Kuf Yud Daled. We are learning chapter 114, briskly flying through all the laws of prayer. And as always, you can find all of this material on our YouTube channel, going all the way back to Hilchos Tzitzis and Hilchos Hashkamas Haboker, at least to Hilchos Tzitzis. So, and Hilchos Shema and Hilchos Tefillah, and the laws of Shema, the saying the Shema, and the laws of prayer. Now, having made that little introduction, let's talk about the laws of making mention of the wind, the rain, and the dew. Okay, and we're not talking about making a mention like it's at somebody on a social media, where this is part of the blessings of the Shemona Esrei. We are talking about the fact that we make changes into this blessing, and it's the second one. Okay, so you finish the first blessing, okay, and then you go on to the second one. So we start saying in the second blessing, this is halacha aleph over here, Mashiv haruach umarid hageshem, the one who brings the wind, who blows the wind and brings the rain. And that starts with the Musaf prayer of the last day of the Chag, which is Sukkos. And you do not stop reciting it until the Musaf prayer of the first day of Pesach. Okay, so that is the important thing. Now, the Mishnah explains, well, why do we start it with the second blessing, right? We say Magen Avraham, and then we go into this second blessing. So why do we do that? So the Mishnah explains that in the second blessing, it mentions reviving the dead, and the rain is the life force of the world, which brings back things to life. Okay, so therefore it's mentioned there. So because it revives everything, or it brings life to everything. And now he explains, so we only say it for a certain part of the year. We should read the rainy season, and that goes from the end of Sukkot to Pesach. So why is that? So the reason why it's appropriate to mention it is because we are judged, Mr. Berurah is explaining this, we are judged by the Holy One, blessed be He, on Sukkot for the amount of water we're going to receive for that year. Okay? Now, we don't like getting rain on Sukkot itself. Getting rain on Sukkot itself is considered a cursed thing for us to see. It's like not a good omen. Because then you can't sit in the sukkah while it's raining. And so therefore, we don't make mention of having rain until the first 7 days of the holiday have concluded. And so therefore, it makes sense to say it immediately after the conclusion of Sukkot. Okay? Like that evening. That would have made the most sense. But since in the evening, not everyone's at shul, so it wouldn't have made the most sense to make the announcement then. Okay? And then people will be like, are we mentioning it? Are we saying it? Are we not saying it? They make all the little groups. We say it now. We don't say it now. And therefore, we do it the next day. So then the Mishnah asks the question, so why don't we mention it at Shacharis? Okay? Because you have to announce it first. Okay? So you have to have everybody there, number one. Number two, you have to announce it. And so that wouldn't, which we'll see in a moment, which will be brought as halacha, and this is impossible to do during Shacharis because you need to be quiet while mentioning the redemption of the Jewish people next to reciting the prayer service. The question is, these weather patterns are only pertinent to the land of Israel. Yes and no. We do mention them in every single place, and we do appreciate rain everywhere. These are actually pretty standard seasons, even though they reflect mostly those of the land of Israel. Yes, but we do need them to happen in that time period. So people who are in the southern hemisphere would have a really tough time talking about this, because for them it would be the exact opposite. Okay. Where was I? Okay, so and if you err and say Mashiv Haruach Morid Geshem in the Marish one Esrei Shacharis one, you don't repeat it. Okay, it's only if it's a different day. So therefore, it goes until Musaf of Sukkos, the first day, and the Mishnah explains why. Well, again, we already said why don't do it at night. Okay, and you don't want to have some people saying to bring rain and not bring rain. And so, same thing, you want to make a mention of it using the Shliach Tzibor himself, using the representative of the congregation. Okay, or they're going to announce it before Musaf. Okay, they'll say, at this point in time, this time they'll say Morid Hatal. Okay, and so therefore mentioning that let's talk about bringing the dew is for saying that we no longer ask for the rain. Okay, now that is for the custom of those who were in Sephardic countries, and they're going to say the sentence Morid Hatal in the place of Morid Hagashem. Okay, and that's the winter switch versus the summer. In places like Ashkenazi countries where they don't say Morid Hatal, what do you say? So he says, excuse me. So he says that you have to make an announcement that we're going to stop saying Morid Hageshem. Okay, but that's also not appropriate because who wants to say don't let it rain, right? Don't rain. Okay, so that doesn't seem appropriate. So therefore, the Ramah says that our custom is to cease from reciting Morid Hageshem. Okay, and so therefore, when you stop in Tefillah Musaf, the congregation will follow that along. Okay. And the same thing rule over here, that if you made an error and you added it into the other prayer services during that day, that would be okay. Okay, so that's what the Ramah brings down. It's prohibited, it's halacha beis over here, you cannot mention the grain until it's announced by the Shliach Tzibor himself. And the Ramah then adds, and some people say it's before you start Musaf is when you're supposed to announce it. And it's announced by someone else who serves the congregation, not necessarily the person leading services. And they should say, Mashiv Haruach. So that way the whole congregation there would know that they're supposed to say it. And that's our custom. So Shulchan continues. Therefore, what's the whole yawning? Gee whiz. I think all the talking makes me yawn sometimes. Therefore, if you are not well, or something else keeps you from getting to the main davening at shul, then you should not recite it yourself, okay, until you hear the Shliach Tzibor say it. But if you know that he announced it, even though you didn't hear him announce it, you just know that he's announcing it, you could say it, and then, so therefore, if someone's coming late to shul, and you see that everyone started davening already, you know that they announced it, and so therefore you go ahead and say it. Mishnah Berurah explains, you can't say it yourself, which means that even if the congregation is saying Musaf, you can't mention rain if you didn't hear the announcement. Okay, from either the person leading or from someone else who's taking care of the congregation. Okay, and then Ramah is going to explain that, and then Ramah explains that himself as well. And the thing is that the Shliach Tzibor himself can't make a mention of it because he's in the middle of davening. But that's only if it's in the middle of the silent Amidah, okay? Because you don't do any announcements before that. Nonetheless, if you say something, in the middle of his davening, he says, Morid HaGeshem. Right? So that would suffice. You shouldn't do it, but hey, then you're now allowed to go ahead and add it into your prayer. But that's not appropriate to do. Okay? So you should try to mention it before the prayer service, somebody who's not leading davening, and then you don't have to repeat it again. Okay? Now, some people disagree with this, and they say that this is only an appropriate announcement if it's done before the prayer service, and you hear it from the leader before he repeats the service, but not if he mentions it while he's in the middle of repeating even the quiet one. Okay, and even the people who were lenient were only saying that you mention it, but you don't have to make the change yet. Okay, so the Ramah says that there are those who say that the person standing there should announce it. Okay, and there really isn't any dispute over here. So it really shouldn't be called a Yesh Omrim in this case. So they say Mashiv HaRuach. So the Chai Yadam warns people that you should announce it before the prayer service, but not just say the words Marid HaGashem or Mashiv HaRuach Marid HaGashem, because there's certain places that will say Mashiv HaRuach and Marid HaTal. Okay, you have to say the words Marid HaGashem. Which places are those? I don't know which ones those are. Only the Vilna Gaon brings down Mashiv HaRuach and Marid HaTal, so maybe he meant Lithuania. And if you're late to shul, you're stuck there, you cannot daven before the congregation, okay? And you can't, and you even learned earlier in Siman Sadi, chapter 90, not to do that. You should try to aim yourself at the same time that the congregation is reciting Shemona Esrei. Okay, and not make it earlier. The Mishnah explains, and even if you're praying in your own house, you can't do it before the congregation does it. And so therefore, people who are further out from the main shul and can't make it there on a Shabbos, they should wait on Shmini Atzeres until the Musaf time when the shul itself would actually daven, which would be towards the end of the 6 hours, because no one's going to leave Musaf for that much later, and who's going to stick around at shul for such a late time? And then they could go ahead and recite Mashiv HaRuach during their own Musaf. Okay, and when we come in, and you find it there, because the Mishnah explains it, because they probably announced it already. Okay, so halacha 3 over here. Okay, if you say Mashiv HaRuach, okay, and that's in the summer times, or you don't say during the winter times, okay, then the words of Mashiv HaRuach, then you don't have to go and repeat. And so too with mentioning dew. If you mention it in the winter time, or make no mention of it during the summertime at all, you don't have to start over again. The Ramah says, and we, the Ashkenazis, we don't make mention of the dew in the second blessing at all. Neither in the summer nor in the winter. Okay, we just say in the summertime, we just say, we end the first part of it, Rav Hoshia Bechalkel Chaim Bechesed, and he quotes the Torah as a source for it. And some say that the person leading the congregation has to stop reciting it in the Tefillah Musaf in the first day of Pesach. But the congregation says it, and they don't stop saying it until Mincha, because they're going to hear the Shliach Tzibur took it out of the Nusach, and so that's what they're going to be in place of their announcement. Okay, and so the Mishnah explains, saying the words Mashiv HaRuach by themselves, like I mentioned to you in the explanation, and you don't say Geshem. If you leave out the words Mashiv HaRuach, it's not a problem. You don't have to go back, because the wind and also the dew are not a big deal, because they seem to come at all times. Okay, so it doesn't matter, but it's still appropriate to mention them. Okay, but saying Mashiv HaRuach, okay, that's a big deal. You need somebody to do that job. Okay, and so therefore, a person should be focused on making those statements. Okay, and even if you haven't finished the blessing of the first blessing, you have to make the mention of wind and dew at all times. Okay, but the Ashkenazim, they don't make any mention of it. So the Shulchan Aruch himself is following Sephardic custom where they say something, and therefore you have to say the words Marid HaGeshem or Marid HaTal. And if you say either one of those in their proper time, you still fulfill your obligation. But if you say it in the wrong time, for Marid HaTal at least, that's okay. Okay. And the Mishnah Berurah comes to explain. So we say we don't say the request for dew in the winter months, except in that blessing there, and that's because we want that there should be some sign of blessing in the world, and having dew is a sign that Hashem is still blessing the world for us, and even in the summer months. We don't mention dew. And if we said it in the summer, whether we say it as a mention of his strength or as a request, like, could you please give us some dew? Like, retain talu matar livracha, which is later in a different blessing. We don't say rain. Nonetheless, you don't have to repeat the Shemona Esrei because you mentioned some of the strength of Hashem. Okay? And so therefore we say that for Ashkenazim we don't have to repeat as long as we just change our Shemona Esrei at mincha time, because as we said they need to see something from the shots that they need to make a change. And if a single person was delayed in coming to shul and he misses the beginning of the repetition of the Shemona Esrei, and he himself first decided to stop saying Mashiv Ruach, Marid Geshem, then he can't say it anymore. And so if a person is far away from the synagogue, they should make sure that they say it at the same time as the rest of their local synagogue. And the Mishnah explains that it appears to him that if there is a question of whether or not they have said it or not, they don't have to worry about it because either way, the change will be satisfactory on that day. Let's see here. What? Halacha number 4. Okay, if you say Marid HaGeshem in the summertime, you have to repeat the Shemona Esrei because that's not the time for rain, and you repeat the whole thing. And if you finish the blessing, you have to repeat the whole blessing again. Okay, sorry. We're in the second blessing. If you say Mashiv Ruach, Marid HaGeshem, start the blessing over again and then finish it correctly. If you finish the whole second blessing, then you have to start from the first blessing over again and start the whole prayer again. Okay? And even in places where they need rain in the summer months, if they say it in places where they should say do, you make them repeat it again. Okay, and the Ramah adds, and so too, sorry about that, I'll repeat that. And the Ramah says, and so too, if you mention rain and dew together, you also have to repeat the Shema again, the Tefillah again. Okay, so why is that? Because Mishnah Berurah explains that on the day when we're supposed to stop, we're asking for rain, which is the Musaf of the first day of Pesach, and both seem to agree that you have to stop by the time you get to Mincha. Okay? And for the Shliach Tzibur, whenever he recites it out loud, he has to also change it. Why? Because rain is difficult for the ground when it's summertime. The yawning, man. So when you oopsie without finishing the bracha, you start the bracha over again. However, if you just repeat the words and take those words out, that's fine, but you should not really do it that way. If you do finish the blessing, you have to go back. The Pri Megadim brought down over here says that you have to say Baruch Atah Hashem even if you don't finish the whole blessing. However, the Sharei Tshuva and Chai Adam say that if you finish, it's only have to go back and finish the whole thing. But if you say the words Baruch Atah Hashem, you can say the words Lamadeni Chukecha, which is a verse, and therefore just start over again. Okay, so if you do that, that's okay. That's that we call Berurah Adonai Lamdei Chukecha is a verse in chapter 118. It's like the 8th or 9th verse, isn't it? And so therefore you don't have to go back because you recited a verse. That's how you get out of the problem. No bracha levatala. I would say you go back to the beginning of the prayer if you really screwed up, because the first 3 blessings are the most important and are considered like one long blessing, even though they are not in practice. Okay, and even if you're in a place where they would really need it, it doesn't matter, because even if the whole world needed it, that's just the way that it is. And there's a Biur halacha on this, which we won't have time to get to. And then you say rain in a time when you should be mentioning dew, which is to say, based on the custom of the Sfaradim, who mentioned bringing dew, okay? And so therefore you're asking for rain in the place of dew, but by Ashkenazim they don't ask for it. And we make you start over from the whole thing again. So even in the case of where we say that the idea of asking for certain things, you're allowed to ask for things as much as you want, which we'll learn in Kuf Yud Zayin later on. So if you ask for rain at a place that really needs rain, you don't want to ask for it in the blessing about the year in the summertime, because that's not the appropriate place to ask for it. Because you're praising Hashem for these powers that He has, and He has one of the powers is that He only brings the rain at its proper time. Okay, and so therefore we don't want to say a nice thing here and a not a nice thing there. Okay, halacha 6. So when do we make you go back and repeat the Shemona Esrei? So you have to say Mashiv Ruach Marid HaGeshem. Okay, you have to do it in a situation when you didn't recite that during the rainy season. Okay, which means you finish the whole blessing and you start the next blessing. And then you have to start over from the beginning of the whole prayer service. But if you mention it before you finish the blessing, okay, and you say in its place, you say, and you go all the way through it and say Atah Kadosh, which is the next part of the blessing. You don't have to go back. You just say Mashiv Haruach Merida Geshem, and you don't say the next blessing. Okay, so the Ramah says that the first 3 blessings are considered one long blessing, and any place where you make an error in them is considered an error that sends you back to the beginning, whether it's by yourself or you're in the whole community. So the Mishnah Berurah explains over here, and even one word, if you started one word incorrectly, and so if you start with Kedusha, you say the word Nekadesh Eshimcha. Okay? You go back to the place where you remember that you made the error, because I'm having some issues with the iPad. Okay, let's behave ourselves, Apple. You go back to the place where you made the error, because the recitation of Mashiv Ruach was not put in place of a blessing. It's supposed to be part of the blessing to make mention of God's greatness in bringing the rain, which causes the world to be filled with more life. Just that our custom is to say it before we end it, which we end it with Mechalkel Chaim B'Chesed, right? You one who sustains everything, because that is giving everything their need to be successful. And so rain is also considered something that lends to its success, and therefore you need to make mention of it in and around that place on the blessing. It seems pretty obvious that if you make mention of this before you say before you're at the very last line, that you have to go back and start the blessing over again, and then start the line of them monat halachayos mesim. Okay, because you have to have, as part of the rules, you have to have the ending be the same statement as the beginning. Okay. And so therefore, you need to go back to the middle of the blessing, the Mishnah Berurah explains, and I apologize, but because of a technical glitch with either YouTube or I think it's the iPad itself, we're going to end the stream now, and we will pick up with the remainder of chapter 114 next time. Thank you very much for coming out.